The drive back to the farmhouse was quieter than before, but this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy with tension or uncertainty. It was peaceful, almost reflective. Maria kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting, gently on Alex's knee, a small gesture that spoke volumes about how far they'd come in just a few days. For his part, Alex stared out the window, watching as golden fields gave way to rolling hills, and eventually the familiar dirt road leading to his relative's home. His mind was still processing everything that had happened at the cafe, but for the first time in years he felt like he could breathe freely again. When they arrived, Alex's uncle and aunt greeted them warmly, their expressions softening when they saw the faint smile tugging at Alex's lips. "How did it go?" his uncle asked cautiously, though the relief in his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. "It went well," Alex replied, surprising even himself with how calm he sounded. "Elena, she needed closure more than anything else. I think we both did." His aunt nodded approvingly, patting him lightly on the shoulder. "Sometimes all people want is to be heard. You handled it with grace, Alex. We're proud of you," Maria smiled at the compliment, feeling a swell of pride herself. She knew Alex had carried this burden alone for far too long, and seeing him finally unburden himself, even if only partially, was a victory worth celebrating. Still, she couldn't help but notice the lingering traces of exhaustion on his face. Healing wasn't something that happened overnight, and while today marked an important step forward, there would undoubtedly be moments in the future where old wounds might ache again. Later that evening, after dinner and heartfelt conversations with his relatives, Maria found herself sitting outside on the porch steps with Alex. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Crickets chirped softly in the distance, and the cool breeze carried the faint scent of wildflowers. They sat side by side, shoulders brushing lightly, neither speaking, for a while. There was no need to fill the silence. Sometimes comfort came not from words but from simply being present. Finally, Alex broke the quiet. "Do you think Elena will really let go of all this?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of hope and doubt. "I mean, can someone just move on after carrying so much anger for so long?" Maria turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know if she'll ever completely forget what happened," she admitted honestly. "But I do think she wants to heal. People don't threaten others because they're happy. They do it because they're hurting." Today, she took the first step toward letting go of that pain. Whether she succeeds is up to her, but I believe she has the strength to try. Alex nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "And what about us?" he asked after a pause. "Do you think we can move past this? After everything I've kept from you?" Maria reached over, taking his hand in hers. "I won't lie to you, Alex, it hurt. A lot. Not just the secrets themselves, but the fact that you felt like you couldn't trust me with them. That's going to take time to work through, but..." She paused, searching for the right words. "I love you. And love isn't just about the good times. It's about sticking around during the hard ones too. If we're willing to put in the effort, I think we can come out of this stronger than ever." Her honesty struck a chord deep within him, and Alex felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He squeezed her hand tightly, overwhelmed by gratitude and guilt in equal measure. "You didn't have to come here," he said softly. "You didn't have to stand by me, especially after everything I've done wrong. But you did." "Why?" Maria smiled, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Because that's what partners do. We support each other even when it's hard, even when we make mistakes. I'm not saying I won't get mad or upset along the way. I probably will. But walking away isn't an option for me. Not unless you give me a reason to." "I won't," Alex promised fiercely, his voice filled with determination. "I swear to you, Maria, I'll never shut you out like that again. From now on, no secrets, no lies, just us." Her heart swelled at his words, and she leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body seep into hers. For a moment, they simply sat there, basking in the quiet intimacy of the moment. It wasn't perfect, they both knew. There would be challenges ahead, but perfection wasn't the goal. Growth was. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Maria spoke again, her tone lighter this time. You know, I came here thinking I'd surprise you with a fun visit. Instead, I ended up uncovering your biggest secret. Talk about unexpected plot twists. Alex chuckled, the sound low and genuine. Yeah, I guess life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes those curveballs lead to exactly where you're supposed to be. Maria tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Does that mean you're glad I showed up unannounced? He grinned, nudging her playfully. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just glad you stuck around despite everything. Either way, I owe you one heck of a thank you. Well, Maria teased, standing up and brushing off her jeans. You can start by helping me carry my bag back to the car tomorrow morning. Driving all the way out here wasn't exactly a picnic. Alex laughed, rising to his feet as well. Deal. But only if you promise to let me take you somewhere nice next weekend. Somewhere without secrets or drama. Just you and me. Now, that, Maria said, looping her arm through his as they headed inside. Sounds like a plan. In the weeks that followed, Maria and Alex worked tirelessly to rebuild their relationship. They talked openly about the fears and insecurities that had driven Alex to keep secrets in the first place, and Maria shared her own feelings of betrayal and disappointment. It wasn't easy. There were moments of frustration, tears shed late, at night, and difficult conversations that left them both emotionally drained. But with each passing day, they grew closer, learning to trust and communicate in ways they hadn't before. Alex also reached out to Elena once more, sending a heartfelt letter expressing his gratitude for her willingness to meet and wishing her nothing but peace moving forward. While she didn't respond directly, he received a brief message a few months later thanking him for his words. It wasn't closure in the traditional sense, but it was enough, a sign that they were both ready to leave the past behind. For Maria, the experience taught her that relationships weren't defined by perfection, but by resilience. Love wasn't about avoiding storms, it was about weathering them together. And as she stood beside Alex on another porch months later, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery colors, she knew they had emerged from their trial stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. Life, she realized, was full of surprises. Some joyful, some painful, but it was the people you chose to face them with that truly mattered. And as long as she had Alex by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. The annual Met Gala is one of the most glamorous events in the world, a place where fashion meets art and culture under one dazzling roof. Every year, celebrities, designers, and influencers gather to celebrate creativity, often dressed in elaborate outfits that push boundaries and spark conversations. This year's theme was Fashion as Activism, encouraging attendees to use their clothing as a canvas for making bold statements about social issues. The red carpet buzzed with excitement as cameras flashed and reporters scrambled to capture every detail of the iconic looks. Amidst the sea of sequins, feathers, and couture gowns, a striking black woman stepped out of a sleek black car, her presence immediately drawing attention. She wore an outfit unlike anything anyone had seen before, a flowing gown crafted entirely from recycled materials. It shimmered faintly under the lights, its texture unique and unexpected. Intricate beadwork adorned the fabric, spelling out words like resilience, equality, and hope. At first glance, it seemed unconventional, even daring, but there was something undeniably powerful about it. Her arrival caused a stir among the crowd. Some onlookers were captivated by her confident stride and the undeniable artistry of her ensemble. Others, however, weren't so kind. As she made her way down the red carpet, whispers began to ripple through the gathered audience. A few people openly snickered, pointing at her dress and exchanging smirks. One photographer muttered loudly enough for those nearby to hear, "Who invited her?" Another remarked, "Did she just glue scraps together?" Social media platforms quickly lit up with reactions, some praising her boldness, while others ridiculed her appearance. Comments ranged from sarcastic remarks like, "Is this a DIY project gone wrong?" to outright dismissive critiques calling her look out of place. Despite the growing wave of negativity, the woman remained composed. She smiled warmly at the photographers snapping pictures, pausing occasionally to pose gracefully against the backdrop of the iconic museum steps. Her poise suggested she wasn't fazed by the criticism swirling around her, though it was impossible not to notice the subtle shift in energy when she approached groups of well-known guests. Conversations would momentarily halt, eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to figure out who she was, or why she was there. Inside the venue, the atmosphere shifted further. While many attendees mingled effortlessly, laughing and admiring each, others' ensembles the same couldn't be said for the mysterious guest. A small circle of industry insiders formed near the bar, their voices carrying over the hum of chatter. One prominent designer leaned in conspiratorially, saying, "Honestly, I thought security would have stopped her at the door." Laughter erupted from the group, followed by more pointed jabs. Someone joked that her dress looked like it belonged in a recycling bin rather than on the red carpet. Another guest chimed in, asking mockingly if she'd come straight from a craft fair. Even members of the press seemed divided in their opinions. Some journalists covering the event hesitated to include her in their reports, unsure whether she was truly noteworthy or simply an imposter crashing the party. Those who did mention her referred to her vaguely as the mystery attendee, or that woman in the eco-friendly gown, failing to recognize the depth of thought and intention behind her outfit. Meanwhile, online commentators continued to pile on, dissecting every aspect of her appearance with harsh scrutiny. Yet, amidst all the ridicule, the woman carried herself with quiet dignity. She moved through the room with purpose, engaging in brief conversations with anyone curious enough to approach her. When asked about her outfit, she responded politely, explaining that it was inspired by themes of sustainability and empowerment. Her answers were thoughtful and articulate, yet they did little to sway the skeptics. To them, she was still an outsider, an anomaly in a space dominated by polished perfection. As the evening progressed, the divide between admiration and mockery grew wider. A handful of attendees found themselves drawn to her calm demeanor and the subtle strength she exuded. They noticed how she didn't shy away from eye contact or flinch at the occasional snide remark. Instead, she stood tall, radiating a quiet confidence that hinted at something deeper beneath the surface. But for now, she remained an enigma, a figure shrouded in mystery, standing alone amidst the glittering chaos of the Met Gala. Little did anyone know this was only the beginning of her story. As the evening unfolded, the whispers about the mysterious woman grew louder and more cutting. Inside the grand hall of the Met Gala, where crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light over meticulously decorated tables, guests sipped champagne and nibbled on hors d'oeuvres while exchanging gossip. The woman in the recycled gown had taken a seat near the edge of the room, her presence still attracting curious glances. Though she appeared unfazed by the attention, the atmosphere around her was thick with judgment. A group of influential designers sat nearby, their conversation growing increasingly animated as they dissected the night's most memorable outfits. One of them, a well-known figure whose creations adorned many of the celebrities present, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Did you see that thing she's wearing?" he asked, gesturing vaguely toward her direction. His tone dripped with disdain, drawing laughter from the others at the table. Another designer chimed in, shaking her head dramatically. "Honestly, it looks like something my 5-year-old made during arts and crafts class. Who let her in here?" The comments didn't stop there. A journalist seated at another table overheard the conversation and decided to add fuel to the fire. He turned to his colleagues and said, loud enough for several nearby guests to hear, "I think I've seen better costumes at Halloween parties." The remark elicited chuckles, but it also spread quickly through the room. Soon, snippets of these conversations began circulating among the attendees, turning into a collective narrative that painted the woman as an unwelcome oddity rather than a participant worthy of respect. Even those who hadn't initially noticed her started paying attention, not because of her outfit or poise, but because of the ridicule surrounding her. Some guests openly stared, their expressions ranging from amusement to outright contempt. Others whispered behind raised hands, pretending to be discreet, but failing miserably. One particularly bold individual approached her table, ostensibly, to introduce himself, but his intentions became clear within moments. With a forced smile, he remarked, "You must have been in such a rush this morning. Did you sew that yourself?" The question hung awkwardly in the air, its mocking undertone impossible to miss. Despite the mounting criticism, the woman remained composed. She responded to the rude comment with a polite nod and a soft laugh, saying simply, "Thank you for noticing the details. It took a lot of care to create." Her calm demeanor only seemed to frustrate her detractors further. They expected anger or defensiveness, perhaps even tears, but instead, she exuded grace under pressure. This unexpected reaction left some feeling uneasy, though they quickly brushed it off, convincing themselves that her silence was a sign of weakness rather than strength. The mockery extended beyond face-to-face interactions. Social media platforms were ablaze with reactions, fueled by photos and videos shared by journalists and influencers attending the event. Memes began popping up almost instantly, poking fun at her unconventional attire. One post featured a side-by-side comparison of her gown next to a pile of discarded plastic bottles, accompanied by the caption, "Guess which one is trashier?" The post garnered thousands of likes and shares, with users piling on insults in the comments section. Even major fashion blogs joined in, publishing articles questioning whether she had gate-crashed the gala or been invited as part of some elaborate publicity stunt. Yet, amidst all the negativity, there were faint murmurs of dissent. A few individuals quietly admired her courage to stand apart from the crowd. One young stylist, relatively new to the industry, watched the spectacle unfold with growing unease. She leaned over to a friend and whispered, "Why are we so quick to tear someone down just because they're different? Her dress might not be traditional, but it's clearly meaningful." Her friend shrugged dismissively, replying, "It's just harmless fun. Everyone knows the Met Gala is supposed to be outrageous." But the woman wasn't oblivious to the hostility directed at her. While she maintained her composure outwardly, inwardly, she felt the weight of every snide remark and condescending glance. Each barbed comment pierced deeply, reminding her of the countless times she'd faced similar treatment throughout her life. People often underestimated her, dismissing her ideas as impractical or naive. Yet she refused to let their opinions define her. Instead, she focused on the reason she had come, to share a message that transcended the superficial glitz of the gala. As the hours passed, the tension in the room reached a tipping point. Guests continued to mock her, unaware that their words would soon come back to haunt them. Meanwhile, the woman sat quietly, observing the dynamics of the room with keen interest. She noticed how quickly people jumped to conclusions based on appearances alone, how eager they were to belittle what they didn't understand. It saddened her, but it also strengthened her resolve. She knew the true purpose of her outfit, and, herself, would soon become undeniable. Unknown to the critics who mocked her, the organizers of the gala had planned a surprise segment for later in the evening. As the lights dimmed slightly and the hum of conversation softened, anticipation rippled through the crowd. No one suspected that the woman they had ridiculed would soon take center stage, not as an outsider, but as a beacon of inspiration. For now, though, she remained seated, her serene expression masking the storm brewing inside her heart. What no one realized was that the ridicule they hurled at her was about to transform into awe. The same gown they had dismissed as tacky and amateurish carried layers of meaning that would soon leave the entire room speechless. And when the truth came to light, it wouldn't just change how they saw her, it would challenge everything they thought they knew about beauty, creativity, and authenticity. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the grand hall began to shift. The initial buzz of mingling guests and clinking glasses gave way to a hushed anticipation. The host of the gala stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, and greeted the audience with a warm smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice smooth and commanding, "tonight is not just about celebrating fashion. It's about celebrating the power of storytelling through art. And now, we have a very special performance prepared for you. The lights dimmed further, plunging the room into near darkness. A soft hum filled the air, growing louder until it transformed into an evocative melody played by a live orchestra hidden behind a curtain. Massive screens lining the walls flickered to life, displaying a video montage that immediately captured everyone's attention. The footage showed powerful images of resilience, children planting trees in barren landscapes, women marching in solidarity for equality, and communities rebuilding after natural disasters. Each frame was accompanied by a voiceover discussing the importance of representation, activism, and using creativity as a tool for change. The combination of visuals and music created an emotional swell in the room. Guests leaned forward in their seats, some visibly moved by the imagery while others exchanged thoughtful glances. The message was clear. This wasn't going to be just another flashy display. It was meant to provoke reflection and inspire action. As the final notes of the orchestral piece faded, the screen went black, leaving the room silent except for the faint rustle of fabric and the occasional murmur. Then, without warning, a single spotlight illuminated the center of the stage. From the shadows emerged the same woman who had been ridiculed earlier that evening, the one in the recycled gown. But this time she wasn't walking down the red carpet or sitting quietly at the edge of the room. She stood confidently under the bright light, her presence commanding and unshakable. The audience gasped audibly, many leaning back in surprise, as they realized who had taken the stage. For a moment no one spoke. The contrast between her earlier treatment and her current position was stark, almost surreal. Gone was the dismissive energy that had surrounded her hours ago. Instead, there was a collective sense of curiosity, even awe, as people waited to see what she would do next. Clutching a microphone in her hands, she took a deep breath before beginning to speak. Her voice was steady and resonant, carrying effortlessly across the vast hall. "Good evening," she began, her tone warm yet authoritative. "My name is Maya Laurent, and I want to thank you all for allowing me to share my story tonight." The mention of her name sent ripples through the crowd. Some attendees whispered urgently to their neighbors, trying to confirm if they'd heard correctly. Others sat frozen, their eyes wide with recognition. Maya Laurent wasn't just any name. She was a globally celebrated activist, artist, and humanitarian whose work had touched millions around the world. How had they missed this? Maya continued, her words flowing like poetry. Tonight's theme, fashion as activism, speaks to something deeply personal to me. My journey has always been about finding ways to amplify voices that are often overlooked. This gown I'm wearing isn't just clothing, it's a testament to resilience, sustainability, and hope. She paused, letting her statement sink in, before continuing. Every piece of fabric comes from materials that were once discarded, seen as worthless. Yet when given care and purpose, they can transform into something beautiful. She gestured toward her dress, inviting the audience to look closer. These beads? They weren't mass-produced in a factory. They were handcrafted by artisans, from marginalized communities, each stitch infused with meaning. Together, they spell out messages of strength and equality, reminders that our differences should unite us rather than divide us. The room was utterly silent now, every eye fixed on Maya as she spoke. Her delivery was magnetic, weaving together vulnerability and conviction in a way that left no room for doubt about her sincerity. She shared anecdotes from her travels, recounting moments when she witnessed humanity at its best and worst. There was the story of a young girl in a refugee camp who used scraps of fabric to create dolls for her siblings, turning despair into joy, or the elderly man in a coastal village who taught his community how to repurpose fishing nets into bags, reducing waste while creating income opportunities. These stories remind me why I do what I do, Maya said, her voice tinged with emotion. They remind me that true beauty isn't found in perfection or conformity. It's found in authenticity. It's in embracing who we are, flaws and all, and using our gifts to make the world a better place. By the time she finished speaking, tears glistened in the corners of many eyes. The transformation in the room was palpable. Earlier, Maya had been dismissed as an outsider, someone unworthy of attention. Now she stood before them as a symbol of courage and innovation, her message resonating deeply with everyone present. Even those who had mocked her earlier couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt and admiration as they listened to her heartfelt words. When she concluded her speech, the silence lingered for a brief moment before erupting into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Cameras flashed wildly as journalists scrambled to capture the historic moment. Social media feeds exploded once again, but this time, the tone was completely different. Posts praising Maya's eloquence, creativity, and vision flooded timelines, overshadowing the earlier ridicule. Hashtags like Maya Laurent inspires and authentic beauty trended within minutes, replacing the snarky memes that had dominated earlier in the night. Even the critics who had been quick to judge her earlier were forced to eat their words. One designer who had openly mocked her gown now approached her table after the performance, offering a sheepish apology. "I didn't realize. Your work is incredible," he stammered, extending his hand. Maya accepted it graciously, her smile radiating forgiveness rather than triumph. Another guest, previously dismissive, eagerly introduced herself and asked if she could feature Maya in her upcoming documentary series about trailblazing women. As the applause subsided and the lights returned to normal, Maya stepped off the stage, her heart full but her mission far from complete. She knew this moment wasn't about vindication or proving anyone wrong. It was about sparking conversations that could lead to real change. And judging by the reactions around her, she had succeeded in doing exactly that. What followed was a tidal wave of support and admiration, as guests flocked to congratulate her and learn more about her cause. Designers wanted to collaborate, journalists sought interviews, and influencers pledged to use their platforms to amplify her message. In the span of a single evening, Maya Laurent had gone from being ridiculed to revered, a reminder that sometimes greatness reveals itself only when we choose to look beyond surface-level judgments. The room was still buzzing with energy as Maya stepped off the stage, her speech leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. The applause had barely faded when guests began to move toward her, eager to express their admiration, or perhaps make amends for their earlier behavior. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The same people who had mocked her gown just hours ago now scrambled to get close to her, their attitudes transformed completely. One of the first to approach was a well-known fashion critic who had tweeted earlier that Maya's outfit looked like a craft project gone wrong. Now he stood before her, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Ms. Laurent," he began hesitantly, "I owe you an apology. I didn't understand the depth of what you were presenting earlier, and my comments were uninformed. Your gown is nothing short of extraordinary." He extended his hand, which Maya accepted with a gracious smile. "Thank you for your kind words," she replied softly, her tone devoid of bitterness. "I hope this moment encourages us all to look deeper, to see beyond appearances and recognize the stories behind them." Her response left him momentarily speechless, but it also deepened his respect for her. As he walked away, he immediately pulled out his phone and deleted his earlier tweet, replacing it with a glowing review of her performance and message. Other guests followed suit, forming a small crowd around Maya. A designer who had joked about her dress looking like something from a recycling bin approached next, his demeanor uncharacteristically humble. "I can't believe I said those things earlier," he admitted, shaking his head in disbelief. "Your work is inspiring. Would you ever consider collaborating? I'd love to learn more about how we can incorporate sustainable practices into our designs." Maya nodded thoughtfully, explaining that she would be happy to discuss partnerships that aligned with her mission. By the time they parted ways, the designer was already brainstorming ideas for an eco-conscious collection inspired by her vision. Even the journalists who had initially referred to her only as the mystery attendee now sought her out for interviews. One reporter, notebook in hand, asked earnestly, "Ms. Laurent, how did you come up with such a powerful concept for your gown, and why did you choose tonight to share it?" Maya paused, considering her answer before responding. "This gown represents years of work and reflection," she explained. "It's not just fabric and beads, it's a tapestry of stories from communities around the world who are fighting for change. I chose tonight because the theme, fashion as activism, aligns perfectly with my belief that art has the power to challenge norms and spark conversations. If even one person leaves here thinking differently about sustainability or representation, then I've done my job." Her words resonated deeply, and the reporter scribbled furiously, determined to capture every detail. Within minutes, her story was being shared across news outlets, painting her as a visionary rather than an outsider. Social media platforms lit up again, this time with overwhelmingly positive reactions. Photos of her gown went viral, accompanied by captions praising its ingenuity and symbolism. Influencers who had previously ignored her now posted selfies with her, tagging her name and urging their followers to support her cause. But it wasn't just industry insiders who were moved. Ordinary attendees, people who might not have paid much attention to activism or sustainability before, found themselves reflecting on her message long after the initial excitement died down. A young stylist, still relatively new to the fashion world, sat quietly at her table, replaying Maya's speech in her mind. She turned to her friend and said, "You know, I used to think fashion was all about trends and glamour, but tonight made me realize it can be so much more. It can tell stories, challenge systems, and create real impact." Her friend nodded in agreement, adding, "And Maya showed us how to do it without losing authenticity. That's rare in this industry." Their conversation mirrored dozens of others happening throughout the room as people grappled with the realization that true innovation often lies in embracing imperfection and purpose over polish and prestige. As the evening wore on, Maya became the center of attention, not because of flashy theatrics or celebrity status, but because of the profound connection she had forged with the audience. People weren't just applauding her creativity, they were acknowledging the humanity woven into every stitch of her gown. Even those who had initially dismissed her as an imposter now recognized her as a trailblazer, someone who dared to challenge conventions and redefine what it meant to belong in spaces like the Met Gala. By midnight, the gala had taken on a different tone entirely. Conversations shifted from gossip and superficial critiques to discussions about activism, representation, and the future of sustainable fashion. Several prominent figures announced plans to support initiatives similar to Maya's, pledging funds and resources to uplift marginalized voices in the industry. Others vowed to rethink their own practices, committing to more ethical and inclusive approaches moving forward. Maya, however, remained grounded despite the whirlwind of attention. She graciously accepted compliments and answered questions, always steering the focus back to the larger issues at hand. When someone complimented her poise under pressure, she simply smiled and said, "This isn't about me. It's about the countless individuals whose stories deserve to be heard. If I can help amplify their voices, then I've succeeded." As the event drew to a close, guests filed out of the grand hall, many carrying a renewed sense of purpose. For some, the night had been a wake-up call, a reminder that true greatness often hides beneath layers of misunderstanding. For others, it was a lesson in humility, teaching them to withhold judgment until they understood the full picture. And for everyone, it was an unforgettable moment that challenged their perceptions and inspired them to think differently. Maya lingered for a while longer, watching as the lights dimmed and the staff began clearing away remnants of the gala. Though the evening had been exhausting, she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had sparked something meaningful. As she finally stepped outside into the cool night air, cameras flashed once more, capturing her serene expression as she climbed into a waiting car. The woman who had arrived, ridiculed and dismissed, was leaving, celebrated and revered, a testament to the power of resilience, authenticity, and unwavering belief in one's purpose. The days following the Met Gala were nothing short of transformative for Maya Laurent. What had started as a night filled with ridicule and judgment quickly turned into a global phenomenon, with her name and message dominating headlines, social media feeds, and conversations across industries. The gown that had once been mocked as tacky or amateurish was now hailed as a masterpiece, a symbol of sustainability, resilience, and empowerment. It seemed the entire world wanted to know more about the woman behind the dress. Within hours of the gala, photos of Maya's outfit went viral, accompanied by captions celebrating its ingenuity and deeper meaning. Major fashion magazines published articles dissecting every detail of her gown, from the recycled materials used in its construction to the intricate beadwork spelling out words like resilience and equality. Designers who had previously dismissed her work now praised it as groundbreaking, calling it a bold statement on the future of fashion. Even celebrities who hadn't attended the event chimed in, sharing their admiration for her creativity and courage. Social media played a pivotal role in amplifying Maya's impact. Influencers posted side-by-side comparisons of her arrival at the gala versus her triumphant moment on stage, highlighting the stark contrast between how she was initially treated and the reverence she commanded later. Hashtags like Maya Laurent Inspires, Fashion with Purpose, and Dasha Real Met Gala Star trended worldwide, sparking discussions about authenticity, representation, and the importance of looking beyond surface-level judgments. Memes that had once ridiculed her were replaced by heartfelt tributes, with users urging others to learn from her example. But Maya's influence extended far beyond online praise. In the weeks after the gala, major brands reached out to collaborate with her, eager to align themselves with her mission. Luxury fashion houses proposed partnerships to create sustainable collections inspired by her vision. One prominent designer even announced plans to launch an eco-friendly line, crediting Maya's performance as the catalyst for his decision. Retail giants pledged to reduce waste in their production processes, citing her work as proof that sustainability could coexist with style. Journalists clamored to interview her, and television networks invited her to appear on talk shows to share her story. During one particularly memorable segment, Maya sat across from a popular late-night host who confessed he had initially underestimated her. "I'll admit, when I first saw your gown, I thought it looked unconventional," he said with a sheepish grin. "But after hearing you speak, I realized it wasn't just clothing, it was art with a purpose. You changed the way I think about fashion." Maya smiled warmly, responding, "Thank you for being honest. That's exactly what I hope people take away from this experience, to approach things with curiosity rather than judgment. Fashion has always been a form of expression, but it can also be a force for good. If we use it wisely, we can inspire change." Her interviews resonated deeply with viewers, many of whom found themselves reflecting on their own biases. Teachers incorporated her story into classroom lessons about activism and creativity. Parents shared clips of her speech with their children, using her journey as an example of perseverance and self-belief. Even corporations began hosting workshops and seminars inspired by her message, encouraging employees to think critically about sustainability and inclusivity in their work. Amidst the whirlwind of attention, Maya remained focused on her true mission, uplifting marginalized voices. She used the platform gained from the gala to shine a spotlight on the artisans and communities whose work had contributed to her gown. Through interviews and social media posts, she introduced the world to the skilled hands behind each bead and stitch, ensuring they received recognition and fair compensation for their efforts. Many of these artisans reported receiving new opportunities as a result of the exposure, with customers around the globe seeking out their crafts. One of Maya's most significant achievements came when she launched the Resilient Futures Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting young artists and activists from underrepresented backgrounds. The foundation provided grants, mentorship programs, and resources to help emerging talents bring their visions to life. Its mission was simple yet powerful: to ensure that future generations would have the tools and opportunities needed to make their voices heard. The response to the foundation was overwhelming. Donations poured in from individuals and companies alike, eager to contribute to its cause. Prominent figures in the entertainment and fashion industries signed on as ambassadors, pledging to use their platforms to promote its initiatives. Schools and community centers partnered with the foundation to host workshops and events, fostering creativity and activism among youth. Within months, it had become a beacon of hope for countless aspiring changemakers. Despite her growing fame, Maya never lost sight of her roots. She continued to live modestly, prioritizing her work over personal luxury. Her humility only endeared her further to the public, reinforcing her image as someone who genuinely cared about making a difference rather than chasing fame. When asked during an interview how she managed to stay grounded despite the sudden influx of attention, she replied, "Success isn't measured by accolades or followers. It's measured by the lives you touch. If I can help even one person feel seen and valued, then everything else is secondary." As time passed, Maya's legacy continued to grow. Museums around the world requested permission to display her iconic gown as part of exhibits exploring the intersection of fashion, art, and activism. One such exhibit, titled "Fashion with Purpose," drew thousands of visitors who marveled at the craftsmanship and symbolism of her creation. Interactive displays allowed attendees to learn about the artisans and materials involved, turning the gown into more than just an outfit. It became a living testament to the power of storytelling through design. Even critics who had once dismissed her began to champion her work. A renowned fashion historian wrote an essay praising her as a pioneer who had redefined the boundaries of haute couture. Maya Laurent didn't just attend the Met Gala, she transformed it, the essay read. She reminded us that fashion isn't just about aesthetics. It's about identity, culture, and the human experience. Her presence challenged us to see beauty in imperfection and strength in vulnerability. By the end of the year, Maya's impact was undeniable. Award ceremonies honored her contributions to both fashion and activism, presenting her with accolades that celebrated her vision and leadership. Yet, she accepted these honors with the same grace and humility that had defined her throughout her journey. At every ceremony, she took the opportunity to highlight the work of others, redirecting the spotlight to those whose efforts often went unnoticed. Looking back on the night of the Met Gala, Maya reflected on how much had changed, not just for her, but for the industry and the world at large. What had begun as a moment of ridicule had evolved into a movement, inspiring countless individuals to embrace authenticity and challenge societal norms. For Maya, it was proof that even in the face of adversity, staying true to oneself could lead to extraordinary outcomes. And so as the year came to a close, Maya stood poised to continue her mission, armed with a renewed sense of purpose and a global community eager to support her. The woman who had once walked the red carpet amid whispers and scorn had emerged as a beacon of hope and inspiration, a reminder that true greatness lies not in perfection, but in the courage to stand apart and make a difference.